Let me start by mentioning that in my mind there are three institutions that could survive over a long period and that have survived over a long period. And those are the type of institutions that take a long-term view. Well, obviously, every time we mention that, the first example that everybody mentions is the church. Because by definition, the church has been the longest lasting organization and will last for centuries. Second, if you look at companies and corporations and institutions, it is clear that universities have been here for a long time and will remain for a long time. If they understand where the world is going, and if they invest on a long-term basis. And we have the luxury in higher education to invest on a long-term basis. So as you know, we decided to go global, and we have our co-op now and experiential model in 85 countries. We are opening regional campuses nationwide and then globally. And we're taking the long-term view, but at the same time we said the world is changing, and if we don't change, we will be, unfortunately, like Kodak or the railway industry. We'll miss the revolutions, we'll miss the change instead of shaping it. The reason I mentioned the first two is that today we're going to be introduced to a type of organization that also, by definition, takes a long-term view, because it's a mutual organization. And we are going to hear from this leader from Roger, who is going to talk about this aspect. So I'm not here to introduce him. I am here to tell you that today we are talking about a long term and not about the next quarter or the following one. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Susan to come and introduce Roger. Thank you very much. Enjoy your breakfast. You know the format. Roger will speak, then everything is on the web. We have questions coming from Twitter and Facebook, and also we have questions that will be originating here from you. So we will try to keep a balance between the two, and if the questions from Facebook are better, we'll give them precedence. Better, and how do we define better? Nicer to Roger. Okay, Susan.
Thank you, Dr. Aoun, and good morning. I'm Susan Esper, an audit partner with Deloitte, and on behalf of Northeastern University, the Massachusetts Business Roundtable, and our co-sponsor, Wilmer Hale, I'd like to welcome you all this morning. It is truly a pleasure for me to introduce Roger Crandall, who is the Chairman, President, and Chief Executive Officer of Massachusetts Mutual Life Insurance Company. I was thrilled when our managing partner, Bill Basic, who unfortunately was traveling this week, asked me to introduce Roger on his behalf, not only because I lead our financial services industry practice here in New England, but also because I've had the privilege of serving MassMutual for the past 4 years, and I've seen firsthand the kind of company that Roger Crandall has built. Roger has been quoted as saying that he wants to run his company the way that Wayne Gretzky played hockey, skating towards the place where he thought the puck was going, instead of chasing it. His ability to anticipate trends that evolve over decades is critical to putting MassMutual, a company that's been around for over 150 years, in good position for the future. One of Roger's key insights has been to recognize the need to adapt MassMutual to the country's changing demographics. He has made a serious commitment to building a diverse company that reflects the communities that MassMutual serves. Deloitte shares this commitment to diversity, and as the leader of Deloitte's Women's Initiative here in our Northeast region, I particularly applaud the commitment to advancing women in the workplace. Another key insight has been to recognize that the social safety net our parents and grandparents relied on is shrinking. Roger has clearly spent a lot of time thinking about the impact this will have on us as individuals, business leaders, taxpayers, and as well as the implications for MassMutual. I am looking forward to hearing Roger's thoughts today on where this particular puck is going. Roger has been with MassMutual since 1988. He spent the first 12 years of his career in the company's investment management department, where he was promoted numerous times before being named MassMutual's president and chief operating officer in 2008. In January 2010, he was named president and CEO, and in December of that year, also became chairman of the company. Roger is a board member of the American Council of Life Insurers and the Wharton Board of Leadership Advisors. He also serves on the CEO Roundtable and the Massachusetts Governor's Council of Economic Advisors. He graduated from the University of Vermont and also has an MBA from the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. Please join me in welcoming Roger Crandall.
Thank you, everybody. Good morning. I'd like to especially thank all of our policyholders that may be in the room and any business clients. We've also got folks here from our agencies here in Boston and Rhode Island and New Hampshire, so if you are not a policyholder or a client, I hope someone is talking to you about that. Certainly, you can wait until breakfast is over, but please, guys, catch them before they walk out. But again, thank you so much. It's interesting talking in events like this, because I've got a confession to make. My mother was going to either name me Mickey, Yogi, and thank God Roger Maris hit 61 home runs. So I was born in New York City. I'm a diehard Yankee fan. I'm a diehard Giants fan. And here I am in Boston, running a company called Massachusetts. So life is full of ironies. You heard a little bit about MassMutual, and it's interesting. A lot of people in Boston have heard of us but don't really know that much about us. We were founded in 1851, so it's kind of interesting. We had 30 people come together in Springfield and say, it really stinks that Connecticut has a mutual insurance company and Massachusetts doesn't. So they put together at that time a fairly exorbitant amount of money, $100,000, and started selling policies. By the way, you couldn't pull that off these days between regulations and rating agencies and so on. That $100,000 of initial capital today, we're closing in on $14 billion of total adjusted capital, which tells you something about the power of compounding over 160 years as well. From starting off literally selling less than 100 policies that first year, we now have over 5 million policyholders and customers around the world, including 1.4 million customers in our retirement business. We own asset management businesses like Oppenheimer Funds, Babson Capital, Baring Asset Management. We like to say we're a Fortune 100 company. We were 101 last year, but I round that up. When I talk about the debt and the amount of our deficits, what's 1%, right? Other than that, unfortunately, that's the interest rate I'm getting on a lot of our policyholders' money. So Boston has always been very important to MassMutual. I mentioned our agencies here. We're also very involved as an investor here. I'm thrilled to be working on one of the biggest construction projects here at Fan Pier, building a new global headquarters for Vertex. We've got over 1 million square feet under development. We have over 1,000 union jobs. Building a world-class headquarters here, and we are completely of the view that Boston is going to continue to be a leading city, not just in the country, but a leading city in the world, particularly in things like education and healthcare, which Northeastern has done a great job of seeing those trends, talking about skating to where the puck is going. So thank you very much for being here. It's interesting when you step back and think about what does a company that can take a really long-term view do? What do you think about? And in a sense, it's a challenge, right? Because when you can do anything and think really long term, it can be a little bit harder. And we really think our big objective is to help our policyholders achieve long-term financial security. So we think about a mission as being the leading mutual life insurance company with respect to three things: financial security. If you're going to hand us money, we have 100,000 policyholders that have been with us 50 years or more. Right, and odds are excellent that we will in fact have customers that are with us 100 years or more, given where life expectancies are going. So when you can kind of think about it, financial security has to be key because I took a little bit of statistics, but I know that I've seen now more 3 standard deviation events than I should have seen in 50 lifetimes, which means that volatility is not uncommon. Volatility, in fact, is common. Right? So we need to be there for financial security, number one. We want to pay the highest dividends we possibly can, which really means having the lowest all-in cost of insurance. But lowest all-in cost of insurance is exciting to actuaries, doesn't particularly fit well into a mission statement. And then we want to provide great customer service. And that's a fascinating changing landscape. And I'm not going to get into this too much, but I talk about the A&A effect, Apple and Amazon. Right? The world that we are all in today, because of those 2 companies, is so fundamentally different than the world of just 10 years ago. And our expectations for quality service have changed. Right? If someone says there's an interesting book, I pull out my iPhone, click, and I download it. If someone says, hey, you can buy this product, I go on Amazon and click. It's literally sitting for me at my door the next day. Right? So the changing world of customer service is critical, but we're focused very much on that as well. We think, and the topic really I have to talk about today is that the world is changing very rapidly, and maybe we don't all see it, and that is how the public safety net impacts all of us. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And the story that really got me thinking about this is I've got a family friend, she's in her early 60s, and she runs the local nursery school. And she said, you know, I've done everything I was supposed to do. I saved, built a diversified portfolio, right? And then I ran into 1999, 2000. Right? The tech bubble blew up, my portfolio got crushed. I kept dutifully doing what I was supposed to do, and then I ran into 2008. Right? Boom, financial crisis, my portfolio got crushed. She said, you know, I'm 63. I can't afford to get crushed again. Right? What can you do, what can you, MassMutual, do to help solve that problem? And I think that is a key thing that as business leaders we all need to think about. What can we do to help not just our clients but our employees solve problems? And I'd say as an industry, one thing my industry has done a lousy job of, we think about products. We don't think about solutions. So I think this trend towards solutions is a really big thing. All of these challenges, by the way, provide tremendous opportunities, and I could not be more excited about the opportunities we have as a company. And actually the financial services is a bad thing, by the way, these days, if you haven't noticed. But broadly speaking, the opportunities the financial services sector have because of this necessity of people taking care of themselves. So for a long time, we've all depended on various levels on the public sector helping us, whether it's through Social Security, whether it's through Medicare. But these are challenges that are big. If we could tee up this, if anyone's never been to this site, this is, I think, perhaps the most interesting and disturbing website in the world. So we'll just let the deficit accumulate as we talk. It's about $1 million every 30 seconds, if you're wondering. So our deficit is going to exceed $1 trillion for the 3rd year in a row. We're borrowing about 40 cents of every dollar we spend. You can see there we're spending about 3.6 trillion, and we're taking in about 2.3 trillion. Well, it's rounded, it's about 40%. The impact of this, by the way, is getting massively muted. I mean, I've said to people, this is, I'm a big fan of history. If you've read about World War II, there was a period after the Germans had invaded Poland, but they hadn't yet attacked France, and they called it the phony war, right? That little number, there are a lot of little numbers here, but the one that says net interest on the debt, $223 billion, right? The cost to fund our debt is like 1.5%, right? So when the government goes and issues 3-month bills, pays 0. The government goes and issues 6-month bills, pays 0, maybe 2 basis points, right? We issue 2-year notes, we pay like 24 basis points. We issue money for 10 years, 1.8%. So no one feels the impact of this, right? But if rates start to go up, and I'll make the bold prediction, rates will go up, right? They might not go up for 5 years, they might not go up for 10 years, right? And there's actually some pretty good arguments that they could stay low for a variety of reasons, including demographics and a savings glut and the problem that the world has and that there's no real alternative to the dollar as a reserve currency because anyone who thought the euro was going to be that is probably questioning that right now. But it is a fundamental challenge. And when you then look a little further here, where is this money getting spent? A lot of it is getting spent on entitlements that are one way or another tied to the demographic change in the country of aging. Right? And the reason I love demographics is we know exactly how many 62-year-olds are going to be next year because they are 61 this year. Right? Now, look, we do create new 61-year-olds in the sense that we have immigration, right? But for all practical purposes, the die has been cast on the potential size of the 62-year-old population next year. And what's happening with the aging and the baby boomers is significant. About 10,000 every day are turning 65. So those numbers there that say Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, are inexorably going to grow, right? And this is an absolute certainty. So I would say to you that whatever happens in this election, and frankly whatever happens in the midterm in 2014, and whatever happens in the 2016, and the 2018, and the 2020, this problem is going to get worse, right? Because we have made promises collectively to ourselves that right now we have not figured out how the heck we're going to pay for, right? And I'm not going to. We can dive deep into all this, but it is just interesting to keep, for fun, put this up on your desk computer one day. Seriously. And just look at that number on the upper left from when you go in to when you leave, right? So it's accumulating away. Over the course of my discussion this morning, it'll have grown, 20 million. Over the day, it'll just run the math. We'll have added about $10 per person in the United States to the size of the debt by the end of today. And then it'll happen again tomorrow, and the next day. And actually, it'll grow a little bit more because the compounding, even a 1.5% compounding happens. It's truly amazing. So I would say that we cannot depend on the public sector as much as we thought. And again, here in New England, look at what's happened in Central Falls, Rhode Island. Even if you think you've got a deal, the deal can change, right? It's amazing, but people don't understand that. And then this is what's happening in Greece right now, right? It's what's happening in Italy. So retirement ages are getting raised quickly, right? Deals that people thought they had are getting renegotiated. So fundamentally, people are getting bombarded with the message, you better figure out how to take care of yourself, because whoever you thought was going to take care of you may not be there for you. Now, employers, I think, play a huge role here. And you can look at a lot of things. I mean, one great example, my dad spent his entire career at MassMutual. So you want to talk about a little bit of pressure at Christmas, especially back in '08. Is the pension going to be okay? Yes, pension's going to be fine. But he grew up in a world where 80% of American workers that were covered by a pension plan had a defined benefit pension plan. And if you did your time, you were going to get your benefit. Now, it wasn't all roses, right? We still had lots of workers who weren't covered. It wasn't portable. It didn't work particularly well in an environment where you're going to have, I don't know, someone here would probably know exactly the number, 7, 10, 12 employers over your lifetime. So I think there's a lot to be said for a DC pension plan. But at the end of the day, a DC plan puts more emphasis on employees figuring out what to do. So as employers, giving them tools. Little plug for our retirement business here. I think MassMutual's got great tools. Go to retiresmart.com and look to help employees make good decisions about how to work their financial future. But the public safety nets, one way or another, are going to get changed. So individual financial responsibility is going to be absolutely key. With that, unfortunately, we are not prepared. So MassMutual actually has done surveys of American families over the last couple of years. A grand total of just under 4 in 10 tell us that they feel they're well prepared. 6 in 10, literally, they're not just not well prepared, they have no plan. Unfortunately, 7 in 10 women have no plan, right? And women are very important for a variety of reasons, but from a simple financial perspective, they live longer. And they also tend to be folks that take care of children. Whether they're married, not married, women play a much bigger role in the home. So at the same time, protection for some of the things we know are going to happen in life, and we all know can happen unexpectedly. Think about the business I'm in. What am I going to talk about? Life insurance, right? The individual ownership of life insurance is at a 50-year low, right? So only 44% of U.S. households now have individual life insurance. But interestingly, when you go, and this is one of the reasons I'm so optimistic about the future, when you go and survey them, I love how he took the debt clock down. Because it's easy to forget. We're not going to worry about it. Let's borrow a little more at no cost. Unfortunately, only 44% of households have life insurance. But when you go and survey them, somewhere between 75 and 80% say, well, we probably need life insurance. No one wants to think about it, by the way, because you have to think about death. That's kind of a buzzkill. So we think the opportunity there is big, but people are not prepared. And people have become incredibly cynical, right? So again, whether it was the dot-com crash, right? Whether it was the financial crisis. In fact, a recent survey of households with $500,000 of investable assets, so this is well up into the 1% category. A third of them say they don't trust the stock market, they think it's rigged. And they see things like the flash crash, which I've yet to figure out. And I think I'm reasonably in tune with it. I still don't know what happened. And it's caused people to really fundamentally, lose faith. So investors are risk averse, they're not prepared, and something needs to be done for it. So the bar for companies like MassMutual providing solutions and products is higher than ever. And I'd suggest to everyone here who has employees, your bar is higher than ever, because what we do know is if you have employees who are more engaged and more comfortable with all of the uncertainty in their lives, they're better employees, right? So I think we all have a stake in this. So we think there are three big things going on that we all need to keep in mind in this context of the social safety net, one way or another, is likely to shrink. The first was mentioned by Susan. The change in demographics in the country is absolutely unbelievable. And again, it's right in front of us. It's happening slowly, so it's easy to forget how important, a little bit like what's happening with the growth in the debt, but it is absolutely critical. We think companies like ours need to be thinking about solutions as opposed to products, and we need to be giving people tools to understand, because one of the things that comes with diversity is everyone's needs are going to be somewhat different. So it's much harder to have a one-size-fits-all solution, we think. And then we think it's absolutely critical to build a business that can think long-term. And again, I'm very, very, very fortunate to get to be the CEO of a company where I can actually talk about a 5 or 10-year plan with my board and not have to worry that I'm going to get a phone call the next day from someone who says, I'd like to talk about enhancing shareholder value. And there's a lot to be said for enhancing shareholder value, but annually elected boards and stock that is held in periods of time measured in days and weeks instead of months and years and quarters fundamentally misaligns, we think, with long-term liabilities like our company, right? Because at any point in time, something that could be really good for the shareholders, read buying back stock, leveraging up, could be really bad for policyholders. Think, I want to make sure that my lifetime income annuity is going to still pay when I'm 97 or I'm only 76 now. So we think our mutual structure of aligning interests of policyholders with the enterprise really makes an extraordinary amount of sense. So we need to think about that. So let's talk about demographics for a minute. Here's when demographics became real to me. As I mentioned, I went to Wharton. Wharton's really good at calling me and asking me for money. Right? That's how they became Wharton, right? So they invite me to come back and speak at graduation. So I go back in 2007 to speak at graduation. And I think, oh, this is great. I get to walk up and speak. And it didn't really dawn on me that I have to sit there and watch 1,000 people walk across the stage and graduate. I'm new to this whole higher education thing, right? So, okay, I sit down, and I just start looking at the people getting degrees. And do you know what? They don't look like this room. They're not a bunch of white guys in their 40s and 50s and a handful of women and a few people of color, right? It was a majority of them were women, right? It was incredibly global, right? There were more kids named Kim than named Smith, right? And I'm just sitting there looking at them going, my goodness. Got to do a little plug for Wharton. These people are going to be running businesses over the next 25 years. What are we doing, MassMutual, as an enterprise to get to them? So I took literally the graduation book with the names of everybody. I stapled a note to it. I said, these people are going to be running the world over the next 20, 25 years. What are we doing to market to them? What are we doing to work? And I sent it to all my executive vice presidents. And that got us really thinking about diversity. So you can look at the statistics, right? You can look at, you've got states already through most of the Sun Belt where the majority of kids born are not white, right? You can take a look at the statistics about now the majority of people entering college are women. You can take a look at the statistics around the growth of Hispanic-owned businesses being significantly higher than the growth of white-owned businesses. But it's happening right before our eyes. So somewhere around 2040, but in fact it's probably more likely to be 2035 to 2038, the majority of this country is going to be non-white. And again, as a financial services industry, we've done a lousy job thinking about how to really talk about multicultural markets. You know, women in particular, it is stunning. My stepmother graduated from Vanderbilt Law School in 1971, right? There were effectively no women attorneys in the early 1970s. Now the majority of people graduating law school are women. She entered a world where, working in New York City, she was invited to an event like this at a club and told, well, women aren't allowed in this club. So I guess we'll let you come, but you can't come in the front door. Again, the same thing that had happened with African Americans just 10 or 15 years before. So the world has changed so kind of dramatically. Women, in fact, we estimate make 95% of family financial decisions, right? Despite what guys might think. They already own a third of privately owned businesses, and that's just going to grow. So these changes are big, and MassMutual has been very focused on this. I'm very pleased that our board, 40% of our board are women or multicultural, and I'm not sure what the right number is, but that's certainly a step in the right direction. We've doubled over the last 3 years the number of agents we have from multicultural backgrounds. So that's very positive. I was really encouraged to see this by policy count, not by premium, right? Because big premiums can distort things, but by policy count, over half the policies we sold last year went to a multicultural customer. So I'm very encouraged to see these trends. But I encourage everybody here who hasn't sat down and looked at demographics and think about what the workforce of the future looks like, and what your enterprise or your company can be doing about it, to think about that. So that when you start looking at that broad array of diversity, and that's in a lot of different metrics. I was thrilled, actually. We added someone to our board who was an astrophysicist by background, and someone said, oh, you know, they're diverse because they're Hispanic American. I said, no, they're diverse because they're quant. They think quantitatively, and most of my board members are very smart people, but they aren't astrophysicists from Yale. So diversity comes in a lot of different forms, but I think we need to give people tools so that they can understand how we can provide solutions that meet their needs. And again, I'll pick on my own industry. We have been so product focused, and we've been less solutions focused. Now this is starting to change, and it's changing on kind of a lot of different levels. But again, I think this focus on giving people tools which they can access the way they want to. So we spend a lot of time, and we think we help provide agents with tools to work with their customers. And what's great about that is agents always figure out how to hit the market they're trying to hit the best. So I don't think for a second I can sit in Springfield, Massachusetts and know the best way to talk to a Chinese American in San Francisco. But guess what? I've got a Chinese American agent in San Francisco who knows exactly how to do that. So providing these tools are really important. The other thing that's changing very rapidly around this is the role social media is playing. So this is kind of interesting. We're about to have Facebook file its IPO, 100 billion, 120 billion, and I love what they say, is Facebook a good investment? We don't know what it's going to be priced at, but we'll put that aside. But it's changing so dramatically. In fact, Twitter, we're going to be taking questions on Twitter. We're going to be taking questions from Facebook. But this social media is changing the shopping experience. So we're changing. I mean, I joked with our employees and some of our agents. You know, back when we started the company in 1851, our sophisticated distribution system was a guy on a horse, right? Things change, right? So we're embracing that change as well. I mentioned we've got significant investments in what we call plan health for our retirement business, because it's no longer just enough to know what the average balance is in your 401k plan or your IRA. You need to be able to put context around that, around life events. You know, buying a house, having someone go to college, deciding to retire. And retirement isn't what it used to be either, by the way. The idea that you get the gold watch and it's 62 or 65 or 68, you kind of stop. What everything is showing us is people are going to continue to work later in life. They may work part-time, right? But in one way or another, they're going to be involved. So we think it's really important to have tools for everybody to empower their employees to understand all that. I mentioned social media, so I'd love to show you something that we're doing now that you won't see on television. Right? One of the losers in all this has been television advertising for some things, but you can see on Facebook. And please friend MassMutual on Facebook, because I hate that New York Life has more friends than we do. It's a little scary. I think my 15-year-old twin cousins might have more friends than we do on Facebook. But actually, I think we did pass them, joking aside. But could we cue this little piece, please?
What can I do for you?
I want some protection. I've decided I need some life insurance on my folks. I've grown accustomed to a certain standard of living, you know.
Of course.
Let's do this.
Look, this one is gonna need some college money.
Ivy League.
Him? Not so much.
I need to go to a state tournament. My dad is really clumsy. Look, I don't have any money yet. I could trade you my brother.
They can't do it for themselves, but if they could, they would.
Now, the best part about that ad is I had nothing to do with making it, but it tested well in focus groups. But it is interesting. So these are not ads you'll see on TV. They are getting shared, and clearly we're doing what other people are doing. We're trying to skate to where the puck is going in terms of changing demographics. And using the little joke about kids talking about, I've grown accustomed to a standard of living, is a way to try to get people to lighten up about thinking about what happens if something bad happens. So, yeah, thank you for watching that. In the context behind all that is we have to be absolutely sure that we're there for our policyholders, and I mentioned a little up front about how critical it is being a mutual company. But mutual doesn't mean old-fashioned, right? So one of the reasons of showing you this clip is we're thinking about marketing and advertising and branding, you know, the way a Facebook would, and we think that that's really important. The long term is an interesting context. So if I said to most business people, what is your long-term strategic plan? 5 years, be pretty long for a lot of places. 10, unusual. We sit around and talk about we have a 20-year plan, and it may not be long enough, right? Because, and again, in the context, if you're 35 and you buy a permanent life insurance policy from us, odds are excellent you're still going to be a customer 50 years later. So, thinking about that is interesting. There's some real benefits to this. Again, a little plug. If you are a member of our company, it's funny, we don't have owners, we have members under Massachusetts law. You're entitled to dividends, and we've been paying dividends going back to the 1860s. We can't prove we paid it earlier than about 1862. I'm not quite sure what happened to those records, but we think we've been paying them longer than that. And just we paid $1.2 billion in dividends to our policyholders this past year, and over $25 billion over the last 25 years. So there's some real benefits to that. So I think a good place to stop, and then hopefully take some questions, is thinking about the obligations we all have as business owners to our employees as well. And I think a little bit of longer-term thinking would be positive. So as we think about how you end up having a great company, we largely are an intangible business, so we talk about having great people and giving them tools to grow, whether it's frankly long-term with us or with their next employer, we think is really important. So we think investing in people makes an extraordinary amount of sense. And then people are going to have to turn around and invest in themselves. And that gets right back to where I started. The social safety net is changing. Right? We're going to have lots of political arguments about who should pay for what, but you just look at the numbers. You can take all the money of all the top paid people and you're not going to solve these deficit problems. And people are realizing that. So anything we can do to help our employees feel that they're empowered to make decisions and giving them tools to be able to take care of themselves, we think is very good. So the bar is rising for all of us, we think, as business leaders at the same time that all this uncertainty is out there. But with that said, I'm convinced that companies like MassMutual that have been around for 160 years focusing on the long term for their policyholders, we are going to sail right through this period of history, and someone is going to be sitting here in this room or a room like this, probably, or maybe a holographic image of them that you'll be looking at on your 3D phone in 100 years from now, talking about how as a country we worked our way through this. So I'm very optimistic about the future, and particularly optimistic about the future for our company. And I appreciate your attention this morning, and I'd really like to get any questions you might have. So thank you. We conveniently have microphones here in the room. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for your comments.
Do we need a mic so that? Yeah. Because I think there are people online. So.
Hi, Priscilla Douglas, Double Husky.
Hello.
I wonder, the whole notion, the core concept of mutuality is key to your company. How does that play into the creation of the solutions that you've been talking about?
I mean, I'll give you an example. And again, we compete with public companies, but I do think the ability to take a longer term view, it is, and I'll put it in the context of our career agency system. So we distribute the vast majority of our life insurance products through our own career agency system. Very few public companies have a career agency system anymore because they looked at it in a short-term time frame and they said, wow, this is an expensive system. We're going to instead go to third-party distribution. And when I take a look at the amount of money we invest in recruiting a new agent, training a new agent, giving that agent tools to build a business, and getting that agent up to the point of being able to be a long-term player in the industry. And by the way, for our industry, if you enter the industry, only about 12 or 13% of those who enter it will still be in it 5 years in the future. So we're thrilled that we're doing significantly better than that, but it's a tough business. But those decisions to invest, where the payback is measured in a decade. I mean, to give you an idea, the break-even on profitability of our core product is 12 to 14 years. Now, if I'm going to have the client on the book for 50, that's fine. It can be tougher, maybe for a public company. You know, what's the half-life of a Fortune 500 CEO today? I think it's 3.5 years. It can be tougher to think that way. So that's a tangible example of, I think, being a mutual and being able to think longer term. Our ability to invest in our career agency system, which we've grown more quickly over the last 5 years than any other company in our industry. We're thinking about it in the context of a 5 to 10 year payback, not in a context of a 5 to 10 quarter payback. So that would be a tangible example there.
This question is, if I can now get back to it, went dark, it's from Facebook. You've been with MassMutual for a long time. Can you offer advice to Northeastern students about rising through the ranks at their future employers?
Sure. First, I never thought I would be at MassMutual all this time. But I'd say that there are three things I think are really important to keep in mind. The first, anyone who's a student at Northeastern has already figured out, you have to learn how to work hard. And, you know, it's interesting, things like hard work and thrift, which were really integral to making this country what it is today, have a little bit disappeared from the discussion. So number one, you know, it means, you know, the Monday after the Giants win the Super Bowl, and you're supposed to be at work at 7 o'clock, you still get up and go to work. You don't call in sick, right? It's, you know, you've got an important paper or project due, and, you know, you don't, you know, watch the basketball game or go out with your friends. You actually do the project. I mean, it's just basic work hard. So again, anyone who's a Northeastern student's figured that out already. The second thing I'd say is become an expert in anything. Right? So what's happened with the ability to get knowledge, you know, instantaneously, everyone wants to know what is the best thinking on anything. Right? So you know, I was talking earlier at breakfast. I got very fortunate early in my career. I became involved in commercial mortgage-backed securities before there were a lot of commercial mortgage-backed securities. You know, I became an expert in something that ended up being pretty big and had some pluses and minuses. So I would say become an expert in anything. You want to be the go-to person. So when someone says, how do you do X, or what's the best thinking about Y, boom, you want to be the person. And then the real key is, how do you then get a lot of those experts to work towards a common goal, right? And that's leadership, right? And I would argue leadership, I'm not going to get into super detail, but leadership can in fact be taught and it can be learned. I mean, are there elements of personality that play into it? Absolutely. But I think if you work hard, become an expert in something, and then work to figure out how you motivate groups of experts to achieving a common goal, whatever you go into, business, education, church, anything, you can be an incredible success. So those would be the three pieces I'd lay out there.
Kirk Sykes, President, Urban Strategy America Fund. Can you talk a little bit about your revelations on demographics and how it's affected the products that you see for the next few years?
Sure. Let me instead of talking about it in the context of products, again, let me kind of put it into the context of solutions a little bit. But again, here is what we've found to be reality: is people tend to want to buy long-term financial products from people that look and think like them. Okay, so I'll give you a tangible example of that. We have a very strong and good business in South Florida, right? And that strong and good business was very focused on a specific population, in that case, Jewish white people. Right? There's a huge market opportunity there with Cuban Americans. Right? But the reality is we were not tapping that market. We set up another business down there to target that demographic. So the product, in terms of, hey, if you die too early, there's going to be money for your family to take care of your family if you die too early. If you live too long, there's going to be money to make sure that you have something to supplement your Social Security if you live to be 95 or 100 or 105. Or if you become disabled and can't work, there's going to be money to, again, help your family. The product was the same. The tailoring of the marketing, in effect, to it is kind of the aha moment. And again, if I look at penetration rates of these products by age or by gender or by ethnic group, they're all over the map. So we think there's a huge opportunity, and what we're talking about now in terms of social networking could change that quite a bit as well, particularly with younger folks probably. Although, the way my father stays in touch with my son's in India right now. My dad's in Florida. They do it via Skype, right? So I'm not whole sure it's about an age thing. So I think, to me, it's really about understanding, really micro-marketing. And that's the other neat thing that's happening. I mean, why is Facebook going to get valued at 100 to 120 billion, or who knows where they're going to come out? It's because they can micro-market. If you use Facebook, you see the ads that come down the side, they're targeted to you. And that's incredibly valuable. We need to do a better job of that as well. The regulatory environment totally is not caught up with that. That's another whole issue for us as an industry. We just figured out email. Seriously. And the uncertainty around what the future regulatory environment is going to look like makes that tougher, but I'd say the technological changes are making it tougher still. But I've yet to meet anybody, regardless of income, age, gender, ethnicity, that when I say, well, if something bad were to happen to you, do you want to make sure your kids are taken care of? They don't go, absolutely. So I think our products solve problems that everybody has, and you've got to think about how you get to them. And again, as an industry, I'd argue we've done a somewhat lousy job, driven by the fact that the ownership statistics are low, but people tell us they want to own it.
Roger, as you know, Greater Boston is doing very, very well economically. The part of the state where you're headquartered, less so. What thoughts do you have about revitalizing the middle and western parts of the state and MassMutual's potential role in that?
Sure. Well, first, I would ask everybody here to think about moving any part of your business to the western part of the state. And I got to tell you, 25 jobs makes a difference. I mean, what is a rounding error inside the 495 or 128 corridor here is significant numbers in Western Mass. So I'll give you an example. Liberty Mutual has set up some operations in Springfield, and talking to them, they say that the productivity numbers there are better than any place else. So I'd encourage anybody here who's thinking about how can I expand in a place where real estate costs are lower. There are skilled people who are looking for work, and you can hire them, frankly, for less than you can here in downtown Boston. Think about the greater Springfield Pioneer Valley area. And particularly in financial services, the corridor from Hartford up to Springfield is one of the richest in the country around that. Education, again, for the whole Commonwealth is a huge strength, but it is in the western part. But, look, one way or another, the greater Boston area is going to help solve the economic issues in western Massachusetts. The question is, do they flow through the government, or are they going to flow through the private sector? So everybody here, the next time you're thinking about expanding distribution, expanding, really anything, at least be willing to give Springfield a look. So that would be my ask.
Vivian Lee, the Boston Harbor Association. I have the converse question to Paul's. Your investment in the Vertex project on the Fan Pier has been a real catalyst in terms of redevelopment of the South Boston waterfront. Are you looking at similar types of, investments in the greater Boston area?
We've historically been very active, particularly in real estate in Boston. The opportunities over there at Fan Pier, this is just the beginning. So anyone who's looked at the site, it is truly the premier development site on the East Coast, maybe in the country. So we're going to be active at Fan Pier. My guess is for a decade or more. A little bit driven by what happens with the market for hotel rooms and condos and office space and all the usuals. But no, and that is. I'm thrilled that it has very positive impacts on employment and very positive impacts on the city. But the reason we're there is to make money for our policyholders. Just not a great surprise to anybody here. But it's wonderful. Long-term real estate development actually aligns a lot of interests, we think. And particularly it feeds, in this case, on the role that Boston has globally as a research center for healthcare. So it's a win-win-win really for everybody.
Now, this question comes in via Twitter, and I swear it's not a plant. This is from a recent college grad. When is it too early to start planning for retirement?
Okay, so.
One of your kids that put that in?
If the answer is if you want some fun, sit down and play with the effect of compounding, not over 10 or 15 or 20 years, but over 40, 50, 60, or 70. Okay? And it is truly stunning. So I would argue if you have income, you should be funding an IRA. And I got to tell you, if you start with the first check you get saving about 10%, everything's taken care of. Now it's hard, right? It takes a unique, person in their teens or 20s to be thinking about when they're 70 or 80. But sit down and play with the numbers. And even at low rates of return, 4, 5, 6%, the difference in compounding 50, 60, 70 years. And what does MassMutual do in the big picture? We help all of our customers save by aggregating savings for the long term. And then when people have bad events happen, we spread that risk to pay out. But the system as a whole has to save more. That's, I mentioned that word thrift. It's funny, we had a new employee meeting, and our 401k plan is actually called the thrift plan. And they said to me, my God, that's an old-fashioned term, right? But it's a good one. And so I would say, if you have a summer job and make a few $1,000s, put a few hundred into an IRA. And do not touch it. Do not borrow against it. Do not pay the penalty to take it out early, as bad as it gets. And 10% is probably about a magic number, actually. You can truly fund your retirement needs, your disability needs, your long-term care needs, but you need to start early. And again, whoever's sent that is certainly can do an Excel spreadsheet. Just play with 50 years versus 40, 40 versus 30. Just 40 versus 30 is magical, by the way. When you get into 50 and 60, it's unbelievable. Was it Einstein who said the most powerful force in the universe is compound interest?